I want you to picture a scenario for a minute. It's the mid-'70s. You're walking down a street in Manila.
Okay.
It's been a long day. Maybe you're coming back from the market or you just dropped something off at a neighbor's house. And tucked in your bag is, I don't know, a tool?
Nothing special.
Nothing special at all. A kitchen knife you just bought. Or maybe a garden tool, a bolo that you borrowed.
Right. A totally mundane, everyday kind of scene.
Exactly. But then you see a police officer. He stops you. He searches you. He finds the tool. And in that one moment, your life just, it changes completely. You are staring down a mandatory prison sentence, 5 to 10 years.
It sounds like something out of a dystopian novel. But for 26 people in the Philippines back then, this is a terrifying reality.
5 to 10 years for a kitchen knife. That is the stake in the case we're unpacking today. We are doing a deep dive into a landmark 1978 decision from the Philippine Supreme Court, People v. Purisima.
In this case, it really has everything. You've got a draconian martial law decree. You've got this kind of judicial rebellion from lower court judges.
And a Supreme Court that had to choose between the letter of the law and, well, the spirit of justice.
Exactly. Our mission today is to figure out how a simple, maybe even rusted kitchen knife became the center of this huge battle over human rights and police power.
And we're really going to get into a question that is still so relevant. Does your intent matter? Or can you go to prison for a decade just for holding something, no matter why you have it?
So let's set the stage. The Philippines is under martial law. President Ferdinand Marcos is in power. And the law we're talking about is Presidential Decree Number 9, PD9.
Specifically, it's paragraph 3 of that decree, right? What did it actually say?
PD9 was issued right after martial law was declared in '72. The whole point was to clamp down on rebellion and lawlessness. And paragraph 3 was the weapons part. It made it illegal to carry any bladed, pointed, or blunt weapon outside of your house.
Bladed, pointed, or blunt. So that's basically everything.
It's everything. Knives, clubs, bolos, machetes, even ice picks. If it was sharp or heavy and you walked out your door with it, you were technically breaking the law.
Was there any way around that? Any exception?
There was one written right into the text. It was allowed if you were using it as a necessary tool for a livelihood.
Okay, so a carpenter with his saw or a farmer with a sickle, they're safe.
In theory, yes. But what about that person from your intro, the one who just bought a knife to chop onions for dinner? That's not their livelihood.
Right.
Well, under a strict reading of the law, that person is in deep trouble. And that's exactly how the police and prosecutors were treating it. It was a clean sweep. If you had the weapon, you were guilty. Full stop.
That's just incredibly intense. So who were these 26 people who got caught? Were they actually, hardened criminals?
Not even close. These were just ordinary people from Manila and Samar, and the charges were for illegal possession of deadly weapon. But the evidence list, it's almost funny if the stakes weren't so high. We're talking about carving knives, ice picks.
Ice picks were a common household thing back then, right?
Yeah.
For ice blocks.
Everyone had one. But they were also easy to hide, so the police targeted them. And in one case from Samar, the weapon was a societin.
A societin? I've never heard that word.
It's a local term for a sharp, pointed instrument, basically a homemade weapon. So these 26 people get arrested. The prosecutors are ready to send them away for 5 to 10 years.
But something happened first. This is the judicial rebellion part you mentioned.
It is, and it's so rare to see, especially during martial law. Before the cases even went to trial, 3 different judges, Purisima, Masarin, and Polo, they just stopped them.
These are the trial court judges.
Correct. They looked at the formal charge sheet called the information, and they all basically said, this is defective, you haven't actually alleged a crime. And they just threw the cases out.
Wow, that takes some guts. The president issues a decree, the police make arrests, and the judges say, nope, not good enough. What was missing?
Context. The judges said that just writing this person was carrying a knife wasn't enough to violate PD9. They believed the law had this unwritten requirement that the carrying had to be connected to something bigger.
Bigger, like a riot or something.
Bigger, like subversion, rebellion, insurrection. They argued that if you aren't carrying the knife to overthrow the government or cause public chaos, you shouldn't be charged under this specific, very harsh decree.
Okay, that makes sense. A martial law decree for martial law problems.
Both.
But the prosecution, they didn't just accept that. They appealed.
All the way to the Supreme Court. And their argument was, legally speaking, pretty solid. They relied on a concept called mala prohibita.
Right, mala prohibita. Let's break that down for everyone.
Sure. So in criminal law, you have 2 kinds of crimes. First are mala vince, Things that are just inherently evil, murder, theft. We know they're wrong, even without a law. Intent is everything.
There was an accident as the defense.
Exactly. But then you have mala prohibita. These are acts that are wrong only because a law says they are, like a traffic violation. It's not evil to drive 60 in a 55 zone, but it's illegal.
And for those crimes, I didn't mean to, just doesn't work.
Precisely. You can't tell the officer, I didn't intend to speed, you did it, you pay the fine. The prosecution said PD9 was that kind of law. The text is clear. It is unlawful to carry. You carried it. You're guilty.
So your motivation is completely off the table. Revolutionary, chef. Doesn't matter.
That was their argument. They said PD9 wasn't just about stopping rebellion. It was about eradicating all lawless violence. A total crackdown.
That's a terrifyingly strict way to see it. It leaves no room for human error.
And this is where the Supreme Court and Justice Munoz Palma come in. She wrote the decision, and she just completely rejected that strict mala prohibitive view. She established what's now called the two-element doctrine.
Okay, this is the heart of it. What are the two elements?
The court said that for a PD9 charge to stick, the prosecutor has to prove two things. First, the physical act. Yes, you were carrying the weapon outside your home.
That's the easy one. That's what they already had.
Right. But the second element was the motivation. The court said the act had to be in furtherance of, or to abet, subversion, rebellion, insurrection, lawless violence, chaos, or public disorder.
Whoa, that is a massive addition. It's not just I have a knife. It's I have a knife because I'm trying to cause chaos.
Exactly that. Justice Munoz Palma explained that this second element, the subversive intent, is what transforms the act. Carrying a knife might violate a city ordinance, get you a small fine, but to make it a PD9 offense with that huge sentence, you need the intent.
That makes perfect moral sense.
Yeah.
But where did they get that from? The text of paragraph 3 doesn't say anything about rebellion.
And that's the beautiful part. This is statutory construction 101. The court said, look, the text is ambiguous when you consider the insane penalty. And when a law's text leads to an absurd result, you have to look for the legislative intent, the spirit of the law.
And how do you find the spirit of the law? You can't just call up the president.
You look at the whereas clauses.
The preamble, the part at the very beginning that everyone skips.
That's the one. The prosecution even argued that. They said the preamble isn't an essential part of the act. Ignore it.
But the court disagreed.
Big time. The court called the preamble the key of the statute. They said it opens the minds of the lawmakers as to the mischiefs to be remedied. You can't understand the rule without understanding the problem it was meant to solve.
The key of the statute. I love that.
Yeah.
So what did the key unlock?
Well, the whereas clauses of PD9 don't mention grocery shopping. They talk about Proclamation 1081, the Declaration of Martial Law. They talk about subversion, rebellion, and lawless violence being helped by firearms and deadly weapons.
So the court just connected the dots. The reason for the law was rebellion, so the law can only apply to rebellion.
That's it. The purpose wasn't to punish ordinary people for having household tools. It was to disarm political enemies.
You know, the court didn't just stop at legal theory. They used these hypotheticals, this absurdity test, to show just how nuts the prosecution's view was.
Yes, and this is where it gets really relatable. They asked, what happens to normal people if we follow this logic?
I remember one about a lawyer gardening.
That's right. The court paints this picture of a lawyer. He's in his backyard, gardening with his bolo. He finishes, remembers he borrowed it from his neighbor across the street. So he walks out his gate to return it. A policeman sees him.
And under the prosecution's view, that lawyer, for being a good neighbor, is going to prison for 5 to 10 years.
Just like that. And Judge Masserin had another one. A person buys a kitchen knife for their cook. They're just walking home from the store. They can't even claim it's for their own livelihood. So, a decade in prison.
And this is what the court called draconian.
It's the perfect word. And they proved it by pointing out the mismatched penalties. This is key. Before PD9, carrying a concealed weapon was a small fine, maybe 30 days in jail under a city ordinance.
30 days versus 10 years. That's a staggering difference.
And here's the real kicker. The court pointed out that at the time, even carrying a Paltic, a homemade gun, only got you a 1-year sentence. So it's completely absurd to give someone 10 years for a rusty knife when a firearm got you one.
That puts it in such sharp perspective. The punishment just didn't fit the crime, unless the crime was much, much bigger.
Right, and it wasn't just hypothetical. This was actually being abused. Judge Purisima, the case's namesake, he wrote about hearing the murmurings of detained persons.
That sounds so ominous.
It was. He said PD9 was becoming a convenient tool for extortion.
Extortion. So cops were using this threat to shake people down for money.
That's the clear implication. You see a guy with a pocket knife, you can tell him, hey, that's 10 years. Or you can empty your pockets right now. Judge Purisima wrote that anything with a sharp edge could be used to terrify people. In this quote, it's amazing, he said, it is too hot in the hands of policemen who are inclined to backsliding.
Too hot in the hands of policemen. Wow. The law itself became the weapon.
And that's why this principle of strict construction is so vital. The Supreme Court emphasized that penal laws that send people to prison, have to be interpreted strictly against the state and liberally for the accused.
Why strictly against the state?
Because the state holds all the power. The individual is at a massive disadvantage. So if a law is vague, the tie goes to the citizen. You have to know with absolute certainty what acts are forbidden. You shouldn't have to guess if returning a garden tool is a felony.
That's just fundamental fairness.
Right.
The rules have to be clear.
Exactly. Ambiguity is the enemy of liberty.
So to bring it all home, the Supreme Court upheld the dismissals. All 26 petitions. The government lost.
They did. But, and it's an important detail, the court didn't say the accused were totally off the hook.
Right. They didn't say carrying a knife was now legal. They just said it wasn't this crime.
Correct. The prosecution could still file new charges, but they had to do it the right way. They had two choices. One, file under the lesser laws, the city ordinances, where the penalty is small and fits the actual act.
And option two.
If you really want that 10-year sentence under PD9, you have to amend the charge and be ready to prove in court that the person intended to help subversion or rebellion.
Which would be impossible for a guy carrying a knife home for his cook.
Impossible. And that was the whole point. The court forced the government to stop using a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
It's just such a powerful example of the judiciary acting as a check on the executive, even during martial law. This was 1978. For the court to stand up and say, no, this is not how this decree will be used, that's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. It shows that even in a crisis, maybe especially in a crisis, the law can't lose sight of logic and justice. The court refused to just rubber stamp an interpretation that led to oppression.
So what's the big takeaway for us today? PD9 is history, but this lesson feels timeless.
The lesson is all about the why versus the what. The prosecution was totally focused on the what. What does the text say? Don't carry a knife. The court focused on the why. Why does this law exist? To stop rebellion.
And when you lose the why, you get absurd outcomes. You get lawyers going to jail and police extorting people.
Right. It's a reminder that laws aren't just code to be executed. They're human tools made to solve specific problems. And when you apply the letter without the spirit, you risk turning justice into that tool for extortion.
That's a really powerful thought. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into People v. Purisima, a case of rusty knives, draconian laws, and a court that looked at the intro to save the day.
It's a case absolutely worth remembering.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. We talked about how the whereas clauses, the preamble, were the key to the law's true intent. In your own life, in the rules you follow at work, or even the terms and conditions you agree to, how often do you look at the whereas? How often do we just follow the rule without asking why it exists in the first place? And what do we risk losing when we stop asking why?
That is the question.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you on the next one.